There's a moment every entrepreneur hits. You're working harder than you ever have. The calendar is packed, but the inbox feels endless. That to-do list never gets shorter, and somehow the business still isn't growing the way that it should be. But the problem isn't effort. The problem is leverage. Welcome to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, John Davidson, and every week I'm sitting down with founders and top performers who have found that lever. The hire, the system, that mindset shift that changed everything. This show is for the business owner who's ready to stop being the bottleneck and start being the architect. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Podcast. It is my pleasure to introduce Jen Nash here on the show. She is an author, she is an executive business coach, and she has an incredible career that we're learn all about, living all over the world, living in dozens of different cities. And Jen, I'm just so impressed by your background, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. Thank you for joining me.
John, I'm honored to be here. Great intro. Thank you so much. You make me sound fabulous.
Well, easy to do when you're telling the truth. Tell our audience, where in the world are you today?
Well, if you'd asked me even just 2 months ago, I would have told you Mexico City, but I now moved back to New York and I'm in Manhattan, and it's very hot.
It is hot in Dallas, Texas as well. So I can relate to you there. Well, I wanted to start out by taking you through your career journey so our audience can really understand why you ended up where you have ended up. So you have been in corporate America, worked on the most impressive campaigns with, these top tier clients that we would all love to work with in this marketing agency world, founded your own agency, and then you also have some success in some real estate investments as well, which has fueled your life with more meaningful work. Take us at the beginning of that and help us understand these little jumps from one to the other and what led to the next step.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was telling someone the story of how, to some degree, a little bit of boredom motivated me to keep switching things up. So as a teenager, I decided I was going to be a creative director in advertising. And by the time I was 26, I was working at Ogilvy on IBM, launching, websites for them and, making six figures. And within 6 months, I was bored. I was like, how have I achieved all my goals? And it's not that exciting. So, it was early in the dot-com era. And I started going to Silicon Alley parties and got really curious about what they were building in terms of online marketing and how that was shifting. And I quit Ogilvy and went to a startup. And at that startup, I met a genius co-founder, and together we built the first offline marketing agency for online brands. So we were driving traffic to the internet from the real world through events, through guerrilla, through outdoor.
Really cool.
Yeah, through radio. And it was so early on, we were able to get amazing matrix and data on how trackable specific codes were transitioning from the real world to the web. And that was all new. Now this is all old hat. Eventually the company was sold to Omnicom. And I moved on. I decided to focus more on consulting with really large companies such as Wonderman and Y&R and Gray, where I got to, again, work on amazing brands like Apple, Adobe, Citibank, huge brands, and IAMS. And then as I was doing all of this, I had this little feeling that I really needed to also be investing in real estate. The dot-com explosion, the stock market crashes had given me a lot of personal anxiety. And I think especially if you don't come from wealth and you don't have any kind of parachute that's off in the distance. And I think we're in an amazing moment where, young men and women are inheriting $70 to $80 trillion of wealth. That giant wealth handover is going to really create some interesting shifts in the world in the coming decades. But
Yeah.
I knew that that wasn't my future. So I knew I needed something that was going to start doing creating passive income ASAP. So I actually again quit my job. I moved to the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania to work for someone who offered me an internship. And here I am in my mid 30s making no money. I got, room and board basically. And I did that for 6 months until I realized, okay, I think I have a handle on property management. And I went back into marketing to be able to fuel my curiosity for investing in real estate and fund acquisitions. And so there I was back in advertising. I went back to work as a creative director, copywriter, and content strategist. And I
Hmm.
did that, for the next decade or even a little bit more, as I was also on weekends buying, renovating, and filling properties. So I had two jobs
Wow.
essentially, which I did, very successfully for close to like 18 years. Um,
Whoa.
yeah. And so my goal at some point was to have, 10 or 20 houses. I got somewhere around over 20 at one point and then realized this is just not manageable with a full time job. Um,
Right.
and so I shifted things around. Yeah, I shifted things around, bought, sold, flipped a few things. And I really wanted to have greater impact. As much as I feel truly blessed by the work that I have done with amazing other leaders and creatives, I wanted to be impacting people more profoundly. So
Hmm.
I went through, I guess you would call it a dark night of the soul, where I was engaged to someone, we lived abroad, and through COVID, the relationship exploded for many reasons. And I literally had to come back to New York, pack up, and figure out my work and my personal life because they were in shambles. And that's when a very good friend of mine, who also used to be in advertising and had become a business coach, said, "You have to hire me." And I was like, "I can't." And he was like, "You have to. Otherwise, you're just going to stay in this loop."
Hmm.
And he was very expensive and I was terrified. But after about a week, I decided he's right. Like, what else am I going to do? And working with him within 3 months, my whole life opened up, things changed. I could breathe again. I felt much more grounded. And I was like, oh, coaching really works. And I immediately began getting ICF certified. ICF stands for International Coaching Federation. And immediately started working with clients because I've been there, right?
Yeah.
I built these things, I've run companies, I've been an employee in companies trying to get to that next level. I have a lot of different vantage points, which doesn't necessarily mean I know exactly what you're going through, but I don't need to. I need to be able to ask you great questions so you can look at things and reframe them. Do
Yeah.
you, do you feel like I got to the meat of that?
I think you did. I mean, it's a multifaceted story over a long period of time. So I appreciate you breaking that down for us. Um, One of the questions going through my mind, I mean, I'm a big brand nerd. Have a marketing degree. I really nerd out with marketing strategies and stuff. And so this agency world that you were so keen on diving into and, were so successful in, boy, in college and shortly thereafter, that was my world. And I actually worked at an Omnicom agency
Oh,
for a time. So a question I have for you is, what was your favorite brand to work on during that early agency time?
My favorite brand was probably Kit Kat, just because it's so fun, and who doesn't love chocolate? Uh,
Right?
but I will always have a very soft spot. This is like super nerdy, very, very soft spot for OS2 Warp Server, because that was the first voice to dictation software ever
Oh,
provided.
wow.
And we used Java for the first time and we blew stuff up on screen. And so there's a part of me that always loves anything innovative. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any marketer listening knows we've got those top tier clients and, oh, if I could work for this company, if I could work for this company. And it's not always, you know, what it's made out to be, right? Sometimes when you realize that the dream can be a nightmare. I'm
Mm.
curious, you talked about being unsatisfied and continually curious. When you were realizing these accomplishments, was it that the work wasn't as fulfilling as you thought, like attaining that goal was, or was the work different than what you assumed, and you were kind of like, this is not what I want to be doing every
I
day?
think the learning curve just flattened really quickly. So, for instance, at Ogilvy, the learning curve flattened so quickly. I didn't feel like I was going to be pushing and progressing.
Hmm.
Whereas when I was working with a digital startup that was constantly looking at different metrics and constantly looking to see which creative was outperforming, what kind of new technology could we use to get more eyeballs, I felt like I was growing. And one of the things I love about my life today is everything I do to educate and improve myself, I can share with my clients.
Yes. Yeah, I think those a great thing to look for in a new coach is who has done it, right? And so I think anytime, I mean, it's like you've taken the test before someone else
I,
is
I'm
arriving at
actually
test
going to
time.
stop you on that one
Please.
because what you've actually just described is a mentor, right? Mentors
Mm.
are people that have done it and they can tell you how they did it. They don't necessarily need you to do it the same way, but they can say, this is what worked for me,
Ah,
right? A
uh-huh.
coach. So, for instance, I can coach anyone doing anything because it's really about what are the problems that you're seeing and how am I helping you look at them from different angles. And I don't need to
Mm.
have walked a mile in your shoes to understand that when you come to me and say, this is a dysfunctional meeting, I'm now questioning my leadership skills. I don't need to have sat in a dysfunctional meeting exactly as the one that you're sitting in. I can actually go
Right.
deeper into like the whys and the whats.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. I appreciate that. Um, so as you're explaining your career, hearing that, a lot of people are thinking, how could it possibly be that this woman is stuck? How could it be that this woman does not feel fulfilled? I mean, we went through all the incredible brands you're working with. You're having financial success, right? At a certain time, you figure out this passive income. Um, how many of the folks you're speaking to appear to be successful on the outside, or maybe like from the LinkedIn perspective, we could say, look like they're thriving, look like they're killing it. People are envious of everything they've got going on, but inside they're really stuck.
I think it's a tremendous percentage. And I actually had a fascinating conversation with a gentleman at a retreat I was at recently. He's in his 60s and he's retired from being a wealth advisor. But for most of his career, he worked as a wealth advisor for, I think it was Morgan Stanley. And somehow we got on the topic of what percentage of his clients ever felt they had enough. And
Mm.
his answer to me, because I asked him that, his answer was out of my entire life client base, I only ever met one guy who was satisfied.
Hmm.
So when you think about decades and decades and decades of people that he'd worked with, because he was by then he was in his 60s, right? That really reframed to me how humans are somehow torturing themselves for more at all times.
Yeah.
But yeah, and in my clients, yeah, I think most of my clients come to me because they want to make more money. They realize they have a great life, but they're just not feeling like they're thriving and they don't know why.
Yeah.
Um, they feel lost, and everything around them is telling them that their life is great, and yet they're lost. Um, or they just got promoted and everything feels really hard, right? And they want
Yeah.
someone that they can literally jump on calls with and run stuff by them. And I really love to align myself with my clients. I like to think of, I'm like your genie in your pocket. I
Yeah.
don't want it to feel sort of like a disconnected doctor call. It's more like I'm an ally.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I want to take you back to your real estate portfolio development. I feel like when the normal person who, like you said, maybe doesn't have a fund somewhere, or have a safety net, or doesn't come from a lot of money, is looking at, boy, real estate investment. I don't have millions of dollars. How do I even get started here? You came into this world with a relatively small bit of money. Tell us how you were able to get in, what you
Mm,
learned, and how you're able to make that scale for you.
yeah. And it's interesting because I know you're talking about $30,000, but I actually didn't use that $30,000 for the first few houses. I went with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they still have opportunities for you to buy your first primary home with no money down. And
Wow.
so I actually bought all my homes as primary homes and, you know, moved from house to house, or thought I was going to move from house to house.
Hmm.
Um, and I went very slowly that way. And eventually, before 2008, a lot of people could you know, get loans very easily, which is one of the reasons it was housing
Cause and
crash.
effect. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The only thing is I was incredibly careful, and my approach was not over leveraging. And I always like there's a quote in real estate: "You make your money on the buy."
Mm.
And I was very aware of buying something that had value and knowing what that value was.
Yeah. And it sounded like you really learned that by taking that step back, that internship for 6 months to really become an expert in something, and then step back into the working world as you're making that work. Is that accurate, or do I have that slightly off?
I would love to say that that is accurate, because then that 6 months would have been really worth it. But honestly, that 6 months was pure fear. I was terrified at the thought of having to manage properties without any understanding of how that worked or the laws or anything. But it really
Yeah.
turns out it's pretty much, know your local laws, get a solid lease, get a couple of contractors under your belt, and so that you have people that you can reach out to and move forward. If I
Yeah.
could go back, I would probably not take that time. I didn't learn that much, but at the same time, it
Interesting.
definitely gave me the confidence, because before I even did the houses one on one, I actually went and I put together a consortium of 4 other people, and we bought a 24 unit in Syracuse. And
Hmm.
that in and of itself was a huge learning initiative for me, learning that I don't love investing with partners, right? Learning who I work well with. And my goal was to leave that partnership with, the limited partners still being my friends. And, 20 years later, I can say that we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because that's the opposite of what I was expecting. Especially this being part of your story of oh, these 6 months, and I really took this big step back financially to become the expert. So, a question for you on that: if one of your clients is looking to change industries, sometimes people have to take a little bit of a step back because you're just not, "Oh, okay, I'm a director level or I'm a VP of this. And so to go into this, I have the foundational experience and everything that I can apply, but you haven't done 20 years in this industry." What is your recommendation for somebody who's switching an industry like that?
Yeah. My recommendation is probably the same as yours, which is figure out how you can get in and get in whatever door you can get in. If you have to take 3 rungs down, take 3 rungs down. If you have to
Hmm.
take, $100,000 pay cut, do it. Because once you're in there, very quickly, you're going to be able to sort of regain everything you've lost, leveraging, the new brand that you're behind, as well as your previous experience. But it might take a year. But I love the quote about we wildly underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years and we wildly overestimate what we can do in a year.
Oh, interesting. Go a little deeper on that point. I'm curious to hear your
I,
deeper thoughts on that.
I think that we often think in terms of like, oh, I'll get all of this stuff done in a year and everything will change.
Mm.
Versus in 10 years, you could learn 3 new languages, play a piano, build a house from scratch. Like, you know what I mean? We're not as thoughtful about the 10-year plan as we
Yeah,
are about the 1 year, thinking so much will get done. But a year is fast. And I don't know about
yeah.
you, but I feel like years are picking up in speed as I age.
They're going faster all the time. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because time is definitely a multiplier effect, right? But that is interesting that we think we'll get more done in 1 year, but less in 10. And then, but if you were to have that 10-year purview, you would probably plan differently as
Yeah.
well, right?
And,
Because,
and that was part of me taking the 6 months off, I think, really committing to having real estate be like a focal part of my life. But
mhm,
once I realized I really needed the income to actually be able to get the loans for the properties I wanted to buy,
yeah,
I went right back into advertising because that's where I could easily make the most money possible for the skill set that I had. And so,
interesting.
yeah, so I just decided, okay, they go hand to hand together. And at the time, I was lucky. I had a partner who would go and look at properties. I found properties using MLS, and I would say, hey, can you go and look at this? And then, they would pop down and go and look at the properties that were all in Philadelphia, which is a very affordable market. That's the other thing.
Hmm.
Pick something reasonable. Like, it's not logical to go out and start buying condos in Manhattan. Just the fees alone might crush you.
$30,000 goes a lot.
Further, yes, outside the city and in Texas.
It sure does. Absolutely. Well, I want to go into your book, The Big Power of Tiny Connections. What is the meaning behind that title to start?
It's interesting. All the book companies say, you really want to keep your title under 5 words. So it was really a struggle for me to finally commit to having this be the title. But for me, the big power of tiny connections is truly there's power in those tiny little exchanges. You never know who the person on the plane next to you is. You never know who the person getting a slice at the pizza joint in front of you is. The bartender at your local golf course might have some really interesting friends that could help you open doors, right?
Hmm.
Change your mindset, get you invited to something you really want to get invited to. So, my attitude when writing this book was truly about inspiring people to just look at these little exchanges as truly powerful. And the
Yeah.
subhead is how small interactions spark awesome outcomes. And, from feeling better about your day, which there's so much data around how even a small interaction with your barista can lift your spirits, improve your immune system, boost joy, to potentially leading to something. Oh, I know somebody in that building. I can help make an introduction. And it's
Hmm.
it's really interesting. There's data around how oftentimes strangers are more likely to help you achieve whatever it is
Hmm.
than people you're close to, because it's
That's
no skin
interesting.
off their back to make a quick intro.
Huh. I never thought about that before.
Mm.
Question for you. What is the most impactful tiny connection that has resulted in large outcome in your life?
Um, well, I guess you could argue. So I went on a date, which could be considered a tiny connection, especially back in the day, because it was literally from, I think, an ad at the back of New York Magazine.
Hmm.
And the date was terrible. And the next day, I called the guy back and I said, listen, it's very clear that you and I are not a fit in a compatible dating way, but your experience in real estate was really interesting to me. Can I take you to lunch and pick your brain about that? And he said, sure. And so, like a week later, I trucked out to Newark, New Jersey, and we had what turned out to be a lovely lunch. At the end of which he said, "You know, you seem very passionate about real estate. I own 216 unit properties. One is in Illinois and one is in Pennsylvania. Why don't you come and intern? You know, I'm not going to pay you
Huh.
very much, but you get, you know, your room and board, blah, blah, blah."
But I'll pay for this date. Yeah.
Um, Actually, I don't know. I probably paid for that one, but but I thought about it and I said, "Listen, I have to go to Texas. I had a job offer on the table running the IAM's dog food account in Flower Mound." And I said, "When I get back, I'll let you know." And when I came back, that's when I called him up and said, "You know what? I'll do it." And so his invitation at the end of a lunch changed my life.
That's really cool. And the fact that you kind of shifted the focus of that meeting from dating to then friendship or business possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
changing his expectations resulted in a huge shift in what that relationship was.
Yes. And I think being honest about how things are working or not working and communicating it clearly is a huge powerhouse and ability in life.
Mm. Take me a little deeper on that.
I think a lot of people shy away from having hard conversations when, if they slowed down and thought about what am I feeling? What do I need in this moment? What is the desired outcome? They might be able to connect better to what they need, connect better to what they are feeling, and in turn, connect better to the other person.
Yeah, that's well said. For those listening and they're thinking, okay, I have all these tiny connections throughout my day, right? And I'm thinking through my tiny connections, like, okay, the barista, right? I've been a barista myself, so I've been on the other side of that equation. But the at this office building that I'm at right now, we've got a security guard who's at the front desk all the time, right? Or I went somewhere at lunch and the person who helped me with that, right? Um, what are some tips that we can enable us to be more intentional, to really take these tiny interactions and make them result in more than just a smile and a wave or
Mm. I think an easy one is if you look at how we show up on planes, a lot of people choose not to talk to people who are sitting next to them or even in the same row. Um, I like to think, if I'm going to have a snack on a plane, I try and bring something I can offer, right? It's that old adage from if you're going to eat in public, you better have brought enough to share, which is so old school. Most people haven't even heard of it. I'm like, no, that was a real thing.
takes me back to elementary school when I brought candy and did you bring enough for the whole class?
Yep, there you go. So I really think being curious. So I once, ate half an orange on a plane and I offered the other half to the gentleman who was by the window and I was in the aisle. And he was so shocked by the gesture. We launched into a conversation about cultures that share. And it turned out he'd lived in Japan for 10 years. I'd lived in Japan for 5 years as a kid, right? He grew up in Africa, but he now lived in Pennsylvania. Well, I hadn't grown up in Africa. I did also live in Pennsylvania, which was unusual because we were on a plane flying from San Antonio to Chicago, right? It wasn't even a direct flight. And we were actually on the same flight the next flight after, which was interesting. And it turns out he loved to bird watch. His wife was a midwife. Like there were so many interesting aspects to this story. I mean, it didn't take my business anywhere, but I did get to go bird watching. I saw, a huge migratory flock move in the middle of winter and a bald eagle, out in the wild.
Cool.
Yeah, super cool. So, eventually I had them over for dinner. And then we met them out. You never know where stuff is going to go. But I think a lot of people choose to not even to step into the ring because they're shy, they're tired, they can't be bothered. But there's a quote in my book that someone actually quoted to me the other day, and I loved that. She goes, I love the line, which is the plot can't twist if you're sitting on the couch.
Boom. That's well said. Yeah, if you don't initiate that conversation, if you don't share the orange, the thing that always puzzles me is the elevator. The elevator is like, when else would you be in a tiny room with other people and just completely ignore their existence? But for us, and especially thankfully for our technology that we have today, makes it a lot easier. Um,
Mhm.
but that's when, like the plane, you're next to somebody for at least a couple hours. The elevator, maybe it's because it's such a short
Yeah,
trip usually,
the
but
elevator's tough. I've never actually managed to make a friend in an elevator or even in a bathroom line, which shocks me because I feel like the bathroom line should be an easy one. But
more
it's
so for the
hard.
ladies than the guys. We've got
Yeah,
shorter lines
it's
typically.
harder because it's very short. I mean, I'm a generally curious person, so I'm very likely to say, I love your shoes. Where did you get them? But you know what I mean? Instead of just saying, I love your shoes, I ask them where they come from, and that creates back and forth, right? So the next time
Yeah,
I see them, I can literally be like, "Good morning, Ferragamo," you know,
right.
and then that might lead to names, which could lead to, where do you work? Oh, I'm on the 14th. I work here. Oh, what do you do? Right? So over the course of months, you could build rapport, and who knows where it will take.
I love that. That's great insight. Well, I want to get to some actionable takeaways for our audience based on your experience. But first, let's listen to a commercial from our sponsor, Sphere Rocket.
Business owners and entrepreneurs will place a proven executive assistant VA for just $4 to $8 an hour, and if they don't perform, you don't pay. Imagine freeing up 20 plus hours a week by someone handling your most time-consuming tasks like admin work, managing emails, scheduling meetings, and so much more. This one hire could transform your productivity and give you back the time you need to focus on growing your business. At Sphere Rocket VA, we make this possible in as little as 7 days. We'll place a proven executive assistant VA in your business for just $4 to $8 an hour, and your VA will take over day-to-day administrative tasks, help manage your email and calendar, follow up with past clients, giving you back 20 plus hours a week so you can increase your sales and even enjoy more personal time. And here's the best part. If they don't give you back 20 plus hours a week in the first month, you don't pay Sphere Rocket a dime. We've done this for thousands of business owners, and now it's your turn to see the results. Click the link around this video to schedule a demo and discover how this one hire can completely change how you run your business. Remember, if within 45 days the VA doesn't perform, you don't pay.
All right, we're here with Jen Nash, and she is sharing her incredible career story as well as many wonderful insights that you can find in her book, The Big Power of Tiny Connections. Jen, I love great stories in podcasts, but I also love when the audience can take away some things that they can just start doing right away. So I want to take you through a few. First, coaching. So it is clear that everybody needs a coach. I always used to think in sports, boy, if Michael Jordan needs a coach, shows you my age, I could probably use one as well. Also in business, we've gone through this of, what does a coach do? It's somebody who provides different views, different vantage points to enable you to solve your problems. When I'm looking for a coach, what are some tips you can give our audience for hiring a coach?
I love that. First of all, how you feel with them on the Zoom call or in person, however you're meeting, is really important. So I want whoever is listening to take a breath, notice if you're feeling tense, notice what's feeling alive, if you're feeling relaxed, if you're feeling inspired. How you feel is fundamentally important because this is someone that you need to be able to go deep with, to share vulnerably with, and to be truly honest with. So you want to like them. It's a fundamental thing. I don't care who else they work with and how cool that person says they are. If your gut saying no, thank you, trust your gut. And then the other hack that I always tell people is ask your coach if they have a coach and what kind of coach. So for instance, I have 2 coaches. I work with a sales coach, and then I also work with a holistic everything business coach. And that shifts from time to time. Sometimes I've even had as many as 3 coaches. So I think if your coach doesn't have a coach, I would actually get very curious and ask, how come you don't have a coach? Because I think it's fundamental to the coaching mindset that we can all use someone who's on the outside looking in. Because I think the core of coaching very much is you are this amazing product in a jar with a label, but you don't know the label because you're sitting inside with all the ingredients that makes up the wonderfulness that is you, right?
Yeah.
It's very helpful to have someone on the outside who's saying, this is what I'm seeing happening right now. This is, and, pushing and asking questions so that you can get clarity on where you truly are and where you want to go.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I know you're also a big advocate of women advocating for their worth, and you've experienced this yourself in your career. Take us through some tangible steps for the women listening. How can you effectively ensure that you are being valued at the level that you should be?
Yeah, I often see women valuing community, culture, and, corporate commitment to them far above the cold hard cash they're making. And this is a problem because for every year you're not negotiating and you're leaving $20,000 on the table, that $20,000 is compounding. Over the course of most women's career, they leave $1 million on the table because they didn't negotiate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. On top of that, we have to take into consideration the fact that women are paid 79 cents to the dollar for what men are paid. Depending on our skin tone, that goes up a little or down a little. But we have to do our research. So the number one thing I always say is research, 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 and not just online. Find a couple people that are in the same role, perhaps even at the same company. Call them up. My approach is, if they won't take your call, tell them you have a niece or a nephew that has a similar, experience level, and you thought you would just reach out and get an idea. Just ask for a range. Can you give me an idea of a salary range? Because I don't want my niece to take too little, right? Yeah. And typically people have no problem sharing a range. They're not going to tell you, yeah, I made $284,000 last year, but they may say somewhere between 270 and 290 is about right. That's super helpful. I find in general, a lot of people shut down talking about money, but it's really important to realize that the company has no problem talking about money. So you need to get up there knowing your numbers, knowing what's fair, so that when they make you a lowball offer and say, okay, we're offering you 250, you don't even hesitate and say, well, according to my research, and I've called several other firms, based on my history, my abilities, and the level of work that's being demanded in this role, 275 to 290 is the correct range. Mm-hmm. And I would even follow it up with a nod to why you think you should be at the high end. Because otherwise it's going to lowball you. You'll get the 275, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so I often really encourage women to do the research because the data will embolden them. Once they realize, oh yeah, I've been here for 4 years, I'm wildly underpaid, I really need to either get a raise or move. And unfortunately, most of the time, the best strategy is to move positions every 2 to 3 years. That is often the only way women are going to make the right amount of money that's fair, that's commensurate with their experience.
Yeah, I have heard that your biggest pay boosts come from the new job rather than the increase. Now, is this something where women are just typically not having the negotiating conversation, or that negotiating conversation is more challenged because of maybe, I don't know, men and women being viewed differently in the workplace, or for a variety of different reasons?
I think it's a combination. And I think, there are absolutely women out there that have no issue negotiating, and I applaud them. but there are a huge stretch that do not want to have that job feel awkward. And if they got offered at the 250 and they know it needs to be 275, they're going to rationalize that 25 grand and be like, you know what? I don't want anybody to be upset with me. I don't want to rock the boat. Whereas a guy often is much more matter of fact. Hey, the going rate's 275. Can you come up?
It sounds similar to what I've heard about job descriptions, that guys are much less likely to be concerned about applying for these insane job descriptions that nobody is qualified for, and a woman is typically saying, "Wait a minute, I don't qualify because
Yeah.
I can't do all these things that pretty
Yeah.
much no human has the ability to do."
Women will only apply when they have 10 out of 10 of the skills listed, and men typically will apply when they have 6 out of 10.
So a lot of this is coming down to kind of a confidence and taking the initiative standpoint, is what I'm taking from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think men are, in our society and pretty much all societies around the world, encouraged from a very young age to tout their achievements. So think about the kids at the age of 4, 5, and 6 playing stickball. Little boys playing stickball, and they got a goal. He's going to whip off his shirt, run around screaming, "Whoa, I did it, I did it," right? That you would never see a little girl doing that, right? It's very much about go team. The soccer ball went in because we all played well together. But little boys from an early age are allowed to scream, "It's all me."
And it's interesting how that manifests into adult life, right?
Mm-hmm. I literally have gone into companies and I run brag workshops for women leaders, because there's ways to brag that are culturally more comfortable for women. And often it's like you work with other group of women at your company and you promote each other's wins and you echo each other's thoughts, and it's communal. And that can be very powerful.
Yeah. So are you saying that is the solution, or is that
one solution?
Yeah.
What's
one more solution of how women can brag effectively in the office in a way that, results in the outcome that you're looking for?
So typically one of the great ways to brag in a meeting is you actually reference something that you did you can reference something that you did at a different time on a different client. Sorry, there was a bug on my keyboard. So I encourage women who are like telling a story in the middle of a meeting. They can say, when I was at Disney, we had a similar issue, and the way we handled it was X, Y, and Z. Immediately, everyone's brain is cued to, oh, wow, she did that. She solved that. She's just shared the outcome. She is powerful.
Yeah. I love that. That's super important for the women who haven't been brought up to speak that way. And, you're not being braggadocious necessarily. You're just being confident and getting the deserved recognition that you've worked so hard to attain. I appreciate that. A couple more questions for you as we round out this fantastic episode. One is, this being the title of this podcast, the Leverage Podcast, is all about the leverage that individuals are employing in their businesses that have a multiplier effect and really helping us live our best life in business, providing work-life balance, what have you. What has been the highest leverage decision that you have made in your career?
Can you give me an example of how someone would answer that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you may say, I made this decision to go into real estate investing, and this gave me the passive income that now I had income coming through, so I was able to focus on more meaningful work. Or you could say, oh, I had, our sponsor, Sphere Rocket. We could say, oh, you know what? I figured out what I could delegate and the types of administrative tasks I could get off my plate. And then I was able to really focus on working on the business rather than in the business. And what that did for me was XYZ.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have to say the creating passive income so that I can work in and on this business has probably been the most dramatic exponential thing. But at the same time, that took a lot of strategy. And, I bought houses, I ran successful, like a mini hotel in Florida for 4 years, and then flipped that so that I could then take that money, pay off other mortgages, and then have that then turn into a passive income stream, which would give me the ability to sit in a place where I can make great decisions. There's a game called Cash Flow Quadrant, which was written by the same author as, designed by the same Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, which changed my life. And he believes that when your passive income equals your expenses, you win the game. And you're supposed to play the game twice and win it twice back to back. And then you give the game to whoever didn't win it and move on. Because
I love that.
That kind of mindset has stuck with me. And I think what you were saying earlier about people often assuming they need way more, I think if you can be happier with what you have and understanding what you need to just get in the moment of whatever it is you want to be doing, you're going to get to happiness a lot faster. And for me, happiness is absolutely a success metric.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Well, I want to enable our audience members to get in touch with you. So for those listening and watching, whether you're listening to Jen, her incredible story and her wonderful expertise and thinking, hey, I could really use this expertise in my life, or even if you're just asking questions and you're saying, hey, I want to figure out if Jen is the right type of coach for me. Jen, I know that you are very open-handed with those types of conversations. How can people get in touch with you in those ways?
Probably the easiest way is just shoot me an email, jen@jennash.com. That's JEN@JENNASH.com. Or reach out on LinkedIn. There are a million Jen Nashes, but I am Jen Nash, PCC, which is a coaching reference. And before we wrap up, I really want to encourage one more little tip for all the people listening. If you know what you want, stop networking for the sake of networking. Start networking from the standpoint of asking for tiny little asks. And I think a lot of people are too insecure or scared or nervous to ask people at networking events for what they truly need. But I really think that the fastest way forward is to be very specific. And you can always end your ask with, how can I support you? Right? So for instance, do you know someone at Xerox, right? And if they say, oh, I might actually, that would be wonderful. I'm looking for an introduction for X, Y, and Z. And I'd also love to know, how can I support you, right? So from introductions to people suggesting people that might be good fits for a product.
Yeah.
People often tend to sit in a passive networking experience versus making a concrete ask. So I would encourage our listeners to think about how they could do that today.
That is great feedback. And I'm actually going to a massive networking event on Thursday. And so I will put that lesson into practice, and I will let you know, Jen, how that works out for me. I have a feeling it'll work out very well. Jen, I so appreciate your time today. It's great learning about your book, about your incredible journey, and I really appreciate you sharing all these valuable insights with our audience. Thank you for joining me today on the Leverage Podcast.
Thanks, John. It was awesome being here.